with each serving. So we've begun the nomination speeches for the 8th vote for U.S. Speaker of the House. On the floor right now, Andy Biggs of Arizona, who at one point had his own name put forward to be leader. That's Kevin McCarthy walking past that faction of 20 that is voting against him, in conversation right near Andy Harris of Maryland, who's among the 20. Andy Biggs, who I mentioned, is nominating, again, Byron Donalds of Florida. He will be the alternate Republican candidate, and there's no indication the trajectory is changing here, and the proportion of the vote is stayed stubbornly consistent over the last few votes. This same faction still mobilized against Kevin McCarthy, still in seeking concessions or more givebacks or sweeteners before they change their votes, if they're going to change their votes. I just spoke with Adam Smith, top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee last Congress, and he says Democrats are in this for the long haul. They anticipate this could take a while and that they will stay unified, and they have been unified on each vote. 212 members of the Democratic caucus, each voting for Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader. Each of these votes lasts about an hour. But really, the meat of what's happening is happening behind the scenes in these closed-door meetings, where I know Nicole has been staking out. And at this point, if there's going to be a breakthrough, it might need to happen soon, or the fatigue and frustration that is visible in the chamber as you sit in there and watch, it's getting more acute, it's getting more noticeable.
Yeah, we saw how there was very little eye contact between McCarthy as he was walking by those holdouts. Nicole, as Scott mentioned, you have been behind the scenes there as McCarthy has been trying to woo over members of this group of about 20 holdouts, along with other pro-McCarthy people. He made these concessions. He's been trying to give away things to make these Republicans switch their vote. But we saw in this last vote total, it didn't seem to make any difference at all. Is there anything else that he can give them in order to get the votes needed? And are you hearing more people in the Republican Party start to say, this isn't working?
I think that's because there are some pretty intense negotiations that are underway that really started in earnest last night between McCarthy and some of these holdouts. As you know, the leader has made some additional concessions, but they're still not there yet. So just to give you an example, after that last round of voting, we saw some of those members like Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, who rushed out of the chamber and rushed into Tom Emmer's office, who is the incoming whip, and he has really been kind of that lead negotiator on behalf of McCarthy. So I think they are hoping to get to some type of agreement if they can. One thing I asked Scott Perry about, because one of the concessions that the leader has made is that he would consider lowering the threshold for the number of people required to force a vote to oust the speaker. Right now, that threshold is 5. The leader has indicated he might be willing to move that down to 1. And I asked Perry, how is that going to benefit the American people? And he said that he feels that there should be a check on one of the most powerful people in the country. And so that is some of the rationale behind why some of these individuals really want to try to force the leader's hand to get as much as they want. Because, again, these are some ideas that they had put on the table before McCarthy months ago. And they feel like they're just now almost starting the negotiations, beginning with the rules package that was introduced at the beginning of the week. So this is still going to continue to be a push and pull. And some of these members, while yes, they are frustrated, also say that they are invigorated by the process, that yes, this is messy, but at the end of the day, they still are confident that they will get there, that we will have a speaker at some point. But before we get to that point, they just want to make sure that they have been able to, exercise their views, their positions, their, negotiating power to try to secure a little bit more of what they want. Now, the big question is whether or not what some of these hardliners want, whether that will be acceptable to moderates. And so those discussions are also happening behind the scenes to make sure those who are supporting McCarthy continue to support McCarthy. So in terms of these votes, I think they're really just playing out to buy the leader more time.
It's so incredible to have you both break that down and to watch this all unfold, because you wonder why the Never Kevins, so to speak, are so dug in. They obviously believe they have significant leverage. And Scott, to that point, Lauren Boebert from Colorado, who won her own election by a narrow margin, said on the floor yesterday, President Trump told her, and we see the Congresswoman there, President Trump told her to, quote, knock it off and to kind of get in line behind McCarthy. They don't appear to even agree with former President Trump. So what leverage does this dissenting faction have as far as the eventual outcome as we look through the 8th ballot?
To a degree, both sides are getting a new type of leverage. Whether it's going to be effective or not, it's a different thing. But Kevin McCarthy is getting increasing leverage in the sense that there doesn't seem to be anybody else who has a pathway to 218 votes. He can make the argument, all roads lead back to me eventually, so let's do it sooner than later. But for this faction of 20, by the day, they're amassing leverage because they're now being followed by a press corps, by cameras and microphones, which really gives them, by orders of magnitude, more attention than they would otherwise get. And honestly, they don't seem to dislike that. They don't shoo us away. So it's energizing and invigorating rank and file members of the Republican conference who might otherwise go overlooked. But one other thing, not only do we not have a House Speaker or a sitting U.S. House of Representatives at this moment, there are really no formal rules of the House. That's why there's so many cameras in there. That's why we can get so many perspectives we typically can't show you inside the U.S. House of Representatives. And having sat in that chamber for 3 days now, through this unique process, it's louder. The behavior is not perfect among members. There's a lot of shouting and shouting down and no rules, to a degree, to govern the debate. That might get more acrimonious and more colorful as time goes on.
We have heard, though, that Ms. Johnson, who is overseeing things at this point, is putting a stop to some of these shenanigans, or is trying to at least. One more question for you, Nicole, because you had that wonderful interview with Byron Donalds yesterday, who said he originally had voted for McCarthy, but he didn't want the position of Speaker, but he was being called upon to serve, and he was willing to do that. Is there any chance that he might change his mind if this impasse continues, or do you think that McCarthy would be more likely to, at some point, say, let's find somebody else because I am not able to lead?
I think unless a leader sees the writing on the wall and just faces the political realities of the situation, and some may say, well, he's already at that point, I think he is going to continue to ride that out simply because he has said that. He has said he is not dropping out. He is not bowing out in any way. You know, in terms of talking to Congressman Donalds, when I asked him point blank, do you want this job, yes or no? He was like, well, not really. So, I mean, you know, I don't even know that it's a responsibility he would want to take on. And there was kind of an interesting moment in the chamber when he was nominated in the last round, and the point was made about, you know, him potentially being the next black speaker, and then you had the Democrats chime in saying Hakeem Jeffries. So, I mean, you know, if Republicans are just putting him up as kind of a figure to maybe garner support to make history in that regard, well, Democrats counter, look, we've already done that. And quite frankly, Hakeem Jeffries has consistently gotten more votes than Leader McCarthy. But again, I think in terms of these rounds after rounds, I think it is a process that will unfortunately continue to play out, whether that's to the frustration of some at home, until, again, we see some kind of headway with these negotiations. Hopefully we will know more as the day progresses, but I do know that there are a number of meetings continuing to happen, both on the floor and off the floor, behind closed doors, that hopefully everyone here hopes will result in an outcome.
Yeah, if at the very least to give your legs and Scott's legs some rest. You guys are doing a fantastic job keeping us up to speed on what's happening, though. Nicole Killian, Scott McFarland, we will check back in with you very soon. And for those of you who want to continue to watch what's happening on the House floor, just head to cbsnews.com/now.
McCarthy.
The Biden administration has a new plan aimed at tightening security at the southern U.S. border.
President Biden announced that plan today. His administration will expand a legal pathway into the country for some migrants. This new rule will specifically apply to people from Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, and Haiti. However, they could face expulsion under Title 42 if they enter the country illegally.
There are a number of ways to immigrate to America legally under our existing laws. For example, an American citizen can sponsor an immediate family member